I'm going to do something that I've not done before. I don't usually show the work that I've done. And somehow or other somebody persuaded me that I probably should. But there's rather a lot of it since I've been doing it since 1964. So I'm going to ask you to be patient with me and look at it at enormous speed, rather as if you'd seen it in the corner of your eye and just thought, what's that? And then I'll go on to the next thing. What I'm going to do, if I can remember, is to try and tell you only what the idea was behind the work. If there was an idea. There usually was, sometimes there wasn't. We'll come to that later. Just a paragraph there. My aim has always been to help organizations express themselves in their own particular way for the benefit of anyone they're involved with. And the key to, I think, the work that I've attempted to do is in their own particular way. I don't have a view of how things should look. I try and find a way that a company should look because that's how it should look. This was for a local government in London. It's one of the biggest local government organisations, Camden. And before this, they all used to go to a thing called the College of Heralds and have a coat of arms designed. This was the first time a London borough actually wanted people to see what they did. So they were bright orange, and people saw that Camden were actually doing things around the borough. This was for a paint company. This, again, very early work in the late 60s. It was a paint company that was number 4, and we presented a scheme to them. This is actually the first time that Wally and I nearly broke up, because we presented a scheme to them which was a stripy scheme, which you'll see we stuck on another client a few years later. And I watched this man who ran this company, and I saw him sitting looking at our work, looking bored, and I sort of looked at him and I thought, this is a really wily character. He looks like a fox. And I said to him, Wilfred, look, we're going to redo this. Just leave and come back in 3 weeks. And we did this fox scheme for him with about 10 different letterheads. And a wonderful guy, a painter called, I've forgotten his name actually, Maurice Wilson, who drew these foxes. And it was just a very enjoyable, the company enjoyed having this as a scheme, and that's really quite an important thing. They loved having this fox, and they loved using it, and they enjoyed seeing their vehicles going around with this animal. This was for a motorcycle company that died, called Norton. And it was just about a green dot, really. There's nothing more to say about it. And we did a little 45 RPM record for them, which was the sound of a Norton winning an Isle of Man race, because the great thing about Nortons was the noise that they made. Sometimes designing is about saving something that people want to change. And this was the first time we were paid for telling somebody not to change it. And this is the famous taken out golden syrup can. It says, out of the strong came forth sweetness. I mean, it's a carcass of a dead animal surrounded by flies. You can think it's probably not a very good idea. But it is very famous and people love it, and it's still there. That was the Hatfield scheme turned into a major gases company. See, it wouldn't have worked for the paint company, but it worked really well for these guys. And these trucks were all around the world. And again, this had looked like a sort of public institution with a coat of arms and a monogram and dark maroon, and this lightened them up. This was one of the first pieces of nostalgia for a company making sausages and pies and things like that, and we wanted it to look as if they really loved what they made. You know, they were proud of their sausages and they were proud of what they did. And when you saw this on a 40-foot trunker, big trunk, it didn't look as old-fashioned as it looks there, and it really worked well for them. This was for a building construction company, and I remember presenting this to a very famous politician called Keith Joseph, who was a chairman of this company, and I don't think I've ever seen a look of more blend of contempt and mystification. He simply couldn't understand what a hummingbird had got to do with a nimble and modern building company. But within about 6 weeks, we'd had 300 letters from workers with helmets asking for decals to put on their helmets, so I kind of knew we'd got it right. This is probably the most successful piece of work I've ever been involved with, because it was for a model maker. And how it worked was these were very, very accurate scale rules around all his stationery. And he would go in and see an architect. The first thing the architect would do would be take his visiting card and measure it to see if it was accurate. And because it was perfectly accurate, he nearly always got the job. So I can say this really worked. And I can't say that about much of what I've done. This worked too. This was for a seed company. I hope I'm going fast enough. Previously, seed packets had just been pictures of the tops of flowers and gardening jargon. So this was my first encounter with the importance of language. So when I hear the word copy, I always shudder, because it has implicit in it that language is just something you have to make a shape of. But language is a critical part of what we do. And rewriting these packs so that it explained to people what these plants were, how to grow them, how big they would grow. It was really a piece of editorial design, but we had to do 200 packs in about 9 months. It was quite a project. This is for a famous shipping line, and this was the first time I used painting as a symbol. This was by Larry Learmont, and P&O is still using it. That, will people look at that and think, well, hasn't that always been like that? Actually, it was a black, thin black line before we put our hands on it. It didn't have a colour. It looked a bit like a spider's web. Now it's a pretty everyday symbol, as is this one. And this one, which used to belong to a company called Auto Union, then got stuck on the front of Audis. This was a scheme I really liked, because this company was London-based, and the tale of Dick Whittington was quite famous if you come from the UK and you love London. He came to London to seek his fortune. He had his knapsack and his cat, and so the knapsack was used as a tarpaulin. And one of our, I don't know if you can see it, he's whistling. He's actually whistling Power to the People, but we never told anybody that. That was the launch of a label called Apple Core, and Jean Martin took the photograph of the apple, and that was very successful for them. It was my first brush with celebrity. This was for Southwark Council. Again, something to make them feel we're a London council. So it was a chirpy sparrow. We used to have sparrows in London, now we don't have them anymore. Nobody quite knows why. And again, this was a project very much about language. They had thousands of forms that were like the top one. Give details of all other persons residing in the rented accommodation which you actually occupy other than yourself and your husband and wife. We asked 10 people, what does it mean? People in from the street, they said it means they're trying to get us out of our accommodation. So we changed it to who else lives with you. So now I'm going to go a bit faster, otherwise I'm going to end up in trouble. This was for a venture capital company who had a sense of humor and realized that humor is a very important part of building relationships. So they let me design a calendar for them, which I did for about 24 years. Here are 4 or 5 of the covers. I love that one, If God Sent Memos, is one of my favorite ones. And the psychiatrist laughing at the clown, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful cartoon. This is also part of the work that I find myself doing, people wanting names. And I think some of them are pretty ordinary. I think the important one there, the Voluntary Euthanasia Society. Most people didn't know what euthanasia was any more than people know what oncology is. It's cancer, euthanasia, dying. So let's call it what it is. Nothing more to say about that. That was the scheme that we did for Tastemaker, which is an André Francois illustration. Fantastic illustrator. That was for a firm of accountants, pretty obvious. It's all made up of numbers. I'm going to go very quickly. This was, I didn't design this, okay? But what we did was the colors had drifted into blood clot red and lemon orange. So we just warmed the colors up. And sometimes that's all you have to do. You leave something alone. Raymond Loewy took the word shell off the shell, but I started the conversation with the chairman of Shell saying, why do you say shell on the shell? And he said, no, you're right. Do you know how long it's going to take me to get the word shell off the shell? I said, no. He said, 5 years. And it took 5 years for Raymond Lowe, not for Raymond Lowe to do it, but for Shell to agree to take the word off. It's BP, you can just see it. It used to be every colour under the sun, now it's green. That was for a design company that I ran for a while. And this is a rather beautiful mark because it just goes on saying Zen as it revolves. It's pretty simple. I enjoyed this because this is again for a company a bit like BOC, but gas is a very light idea. And so the idea that drove this was just the lightness, really. These were pretty obvious. These were stamps. I do quite a lot of stamps for the Royal Mail. These were stamps that, particularly, I don't know if you can see it, it says the check in the mail. And it's right out beyond most of the planets. So probably never going to get there. That was for Neil Kinnock, political party, Labour rose, and I can't say it's why they won the election, but it did help them. That's, again, pretty obvious, 2 initials, BG. How can you make them work as one idea? You put the G and the B and it sort of works. That was done by John Rushworth at Pentagram, and I was responsible for the name. The point of the name really was, how can you get a group name that doesn't compete with the name of the particular hotel? So you didn't want to say the Saint Geran Hotel, part of the Kerzner Enterprises group or whatever. So One and Only became the name of the group, so they could then say the one and only Saint Geran, the one and only this, the one and only that, and it didn't seem like a conflict of names. That was for a friend of mine who rescues Asian elephants who are at quite a lot of risk, and it's just elephant family, and the idea is really that if you draw the initials, you've drawn an elephant. Pretty simple. This was for British Caledonia, and it was the precursor of the campaign that I did with Newland Sorrow for British Airways, which Margaret Thatcher put the handkerchief on the tail and that killed it. But it was for B. Cowell, who did use tartans for their stewardesses, and this was different tartans on the tail fins. That, I think we might call that frivolous. It's for a company that they get anything for anybody. They buy tickets for you, they organize trips for you, they do everything. And in a way, I just use the gibbon because the gibbon seems to be the one creature that has, I mean, it's all arms and legs, and it just, I mean, it has the most amazing agility. That was for an orchestra. We're going to go really fast. That's a website for, not for babies, but for people who have them. Okay. That was a precursor of Orange, which then came out as a telephone network, but started its life as a clothing retailer called Orange Hand. This is the only thing I'm going to show you that didn't actually happen, but we really wished it did. It was a Swedish shipping line, and these were based on the sort of figureheads that you used to get on wooden ships. I thought these would just look amazing, coming towards you in the fog on a huge funnel, 40 foot high. But it didn't happen. This did happen, and the point of this was really that insurance is all about knowing the risk. And a tightrope walker knows the risk much better than an 18-year-old kid in a Kawasaki. So in a way, a tightrope walker symbolizes knowing the risk. Then I started another chapter of my life. I left Wolff-Olins, and I started working as a design consultant, working with marvelous designers, illustrators and writers and photographers. And these are just a few things that I did with W.H. Smith. There were 200 of these packs. I worked with a cartoonist called Larry. I always liked the magnifying glass, particularly the drawing of the lady with a cup of tea, looking at the spider with amazement. And then not many companies would let you put an actual seal in their company seal, so they had kind of witty appreciation of wit, which I think that demonstrates as well. This was how do you take boring A4 stationery, which previously only said A4 on the cover, and trying to make them into something which might inspire you to be a mathematician or inspire you to be a writer or whatever else. This was a little piece of print for people who might be thinking of joining the company, which told the truth about the company, unexpurgated, told by a whole series of people who'd either worked there for 100 years or whatever, or just joined. But it was a humorous and friendly piece of print, symbol for a cut-price music business. This was interesting. It was a little dog for a stationery company. You can see Dogalog instead of catalog. And this is by Charles Barsotti, who was a New Yorker cartoonist. And again, thousands of packs, all of them with a bit of humor to it. I mean, they did a flip chart, so the dog is doing sort of double somersault. This company crashed, but they were really great to work for while they were alive. Biggest kitchen manufacturer in Europe. And again, with my friends at SAS, we did some annual reports which just looked like, I don't know, it kind of reflected who they were. And again, a certain amount of wit, the guy looking through the binoculars and the two washing machines. And then having a family living in the store and photographing them for about a week. Playing golf with the washing machine or whatever. And that, which was a half-year result, so it's a half report. And it takes a lot of courage, actually, for a client to have a sense of humor and enter into it with the same enthusiasm as we did. This is a job that I'm currently doing for a Russian bank. And what's interesting about this is a bank that lends money to people who have very little money. So that, for example, if your fridge door is broken, it doesn't just mean you've got to get a new fridge door. It means that you can't shop once a week. You have to shop every day because you can't keep your food fresh. So you have to borrow the money if you haven't got it to get a fridge door. So these people are all, it's a bank almost entirely run by women. And they enter into sort of partnerships because they get paid if a loan gets repaid, and they have to pay if the loan doesn't get repaid. It's quite a dangerous business to be in, as you can imagine. And they have this little creature. I'm a bit fond of little creatures, you probably guessed by now. And this is a very popular one in Russia. And it's woven into lace. And it just doesn't look like a Western brand. It looks like a Russian bank. And it feels like a Russian bank, and that's what they wanted it to be like. And the other thing we did for them was to use photography in a way that it just doesn't look like idealized, smiling people. And there's always a story. I mean, she borrowed the money for him to repair his motorcycle so he could then go to work. So it's all very human stuff, and the photography is all genuine. I don't quite remember what this guy's story was, but all the, what we call brochures, all the print for this company were short stories, true short stories. Nothing sort of extolling the wonders of the company, nothing about deals, nothing about percentages, all stories about real life with real photography like that. And there's the little cat, and that was a countdown to their website, which I think just happened. Very nearly there. This is for Mother Care. It's a company that obviously is for parents and grandparents to buy things for the babies. And again, this is all about photography, really, and writing with wit, writing with sort of engagement. For that wonderful, frustrating, hilarious, serious, exhausting, rewarding process called parenting. Well, anyone who's a parent knows that is pretty much what it is like. Using Ivan Shemaev to do illustrations, and just bringing the company to life. City, huge, great bank. We did this with Michael, actually. Where is he? Yeah. That is for a business school in Fontainebleau. And it's really about living in the question and the idea of turning things on their head. But the idea that drove this was when you photograph people, don't just chop off their heads and expect that Professor of so-and-so is going to, you're going to be able to see the quality of a person just by a decapitation. So these are pictures of some of the professors, and it really gives you something to get your teeth into in terms of, well, what could this person be like? So photography is such a wonderful medium, and to print all over it, such a shame, and to give it its full voice so that you use photography really to reveal what people are like. It's great, it's a joy, and also to show the campuses, one in Singapore, one in Fontainebleau. And this was, where are you? The Design Council. Yes, David Kester, working for the UK government. This, and with the Design Council, who are now doing extraordinary things in the UK. This was a project really to show how you can get past crime. A lot of designers are pretty close to criminals in terms of their creativity. So this is how to outwit crime by just doing things in an intelligent way that makes crime much harder for people to accomplish. And again, it's another animal, I'm afraid, but it's got a bit of humour to it. And this was a Neighbourhood Watch, is a grassroots movement in the UK for communities to protect themselves from crime. For some reason, nobody realised that the word "our" is inside the word "neighbourhood." And so that was really what this one was about, so that you could use the fact that the "our" word is inside there and talk about our town, our school, our whatever it is you want to protect. This is part of a campaign, I'm sorry about this speed, this is part of a campaign for raising 1.2 billion for Oxford University. And Oxford is totally text-based in all their messages. Again, never understood about illustration. So using Paul Davis with an envelope that said, a brain saying, "I think I'm going to do something," was quite a jump for people who talk themselves out of doing anything at all. And these wonderful planet names like the Y Star and Bang and Savant and Augmenting, I can't even read it. I mean, he did the constellation of Yes. It's a wonderful planet name. And then using photography in a way that they'd never done it in the university. They'd never seen photography as something that had anything to do with them. So we did a whole series of the Oxford Thinking Blooms annually. There was this is a campaign report, how the money is being spent. Oxford Thinking has no walls. That's a nice one. Oxford Thinking shows the way. And it evokes nostalgia in people who've been to Oxford, and hopefully it opens their wallets. That's the idea of it. Oxford Thinking blows your mind. And it's a wonderful photograph. And finally, a project that I'm doing now with a company that are in what's called fundraising, which kind of exists in an assumption that there isn't enough money, that no one's got enough money, that all their clients are running out of money. There's a real feeling of scarcity. And they were called Ian Moore Associates. And they said to me, if we call ourselves the Moore Partnership, is that better? Will you work for us? And I said, well, if you take the word "the" off, I think we can do something. So now they're called Moore Partnership. And we're having lots of fun doing obvious things with the word "more." There's a diary. There's a magnifying glass. That's the end of 40 years of work. So, you know, I kind of look at it and think... Thank you, Michael Wolff.
I'd just like to frame this a little carefully. I don't usually just jump onto the stage to interview designers, and Michael actually requested that, I suppose, someone outside of the design world ask a few questions. Would that be okay?
Well, I said I'm never going to speak in front of an audience again, because being interviewed is, you don't have to prepare for it, and therefore it's going to be more spontaneous. So I would have done this whole thing with you if you'd have agreed to do it, not shown any work at all, but there we go.
Well, there we go. You know, the last time I interviewed Michael, he was in fact wearing, he told me, a blue dressing gown.
Yeah, because you woke me up.
I know. And I was wondering if you would maybe do that, but I see you are wearing blue Crocs.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, I don't work in the design world, but man, I thought Crocs were so unstylish, sorry.
No, absolutely. They're totally without style.
They're totally, so that gives them style anyway. So, Michael, what I'd like to do is just give you a couple of quotes that you've given me over time, and maybe if you could just frame them for us. And the first one would be that you said, the enemy of all ideas is in fact the idea that you're currently with.
Yeah, it's like, we were talking about scarcity a moment ago. I think sometimes I feel, certainly, and I'm sure I'm like most other people, that you have an idea and you think you may not ever get another one. So you hang on to it like grim death, and you fight for it, and you're with a client who's going to try and kill it, and you think if he kills it, I'm standing here naked without an idea. So I had this experience with this talk as well. You know, the talk I planned got in the way of the talk I would have liked to have given, which is happening now. So I often find having an idea is a block to having more. And when I teach, I will say to students, what you must do with a great idea is immediately throw it away, because otherwise you won't exercise your idea creating capacity. Just keep throwing them away because you're going to get more and more of them.
All right. I'm not sure experience is my friend, quote, unquote.
Yeah, I'm not sure experience is my friend. Well, the problem with experience is that it tends to make you think you know what to do. And for me, since creativity is bringing something into existence that wasn't there before, if you think you know what to do, you're going to be bringing something into existence that you've done before. So I mistrust my experience in terms of using my imagination. It's going to color it, taint it, try and dominate it. So I try to discount my experience as often as I can.
You talk about using your imagination, and one of the things that you spoke to me about in depth was this idea of using creativity and imagination as a very physical muscle, and that all designers should in fact be looking at creativity, that they should focus on the world, not just with creativity, but perhaps curiosity.
Yeah.
There might be a lack of curiosity.
Yeah. Well, the example is a very obvious example, which you all know. The wheel has existed for 8,000 years. How come we only put it on a suitcase 30 years ago? You know, I mean, why does it take so long for such obvious things to happen? And now, in the UK, I'm looking at what inclusive design, that's to say design that takes into account people who see less well, hear less well, move less well, feel less well, think less well, whatever impairment people are dealing with. And you only have to use your curiosity. I mean, it's so obvious when you see somebody in a wheelchair who can't reach an ATM and has to ask a complete stranger to take his card or her card, put it in the ATM, give them the number, take out their money. That's an absurdity. Why is a wheelchair user not able to use an ATM in most cases? So that's just a question of looking at life and saying, why is this person going through this? You know, why is this happening? And why is this like that? And if you use your curiosity and think of it as a muscle that you exercise and question things. I mean, we had a conversation a few moments ago about you know, if you can't see very well, you have an operation, you get a pair of glasses. Glasses are fantastic. If you can't hear very well, you don't admit it, and you get a hearing aid that looks like a dried banana. You know, why haven't hearing aids happened? Why can't I get 3 black pearls hanging from my ear? Or some beautiful thing that has a digital display of decibel levels or something, you know, why haven't hearing aids happened? Now that's just one simple question, but why haven't ... happened? There are so many opportunities to make life better, especially as we have countries with aging populations. We just can't deal with aging, we're just completely hopeless with it.
You mentioned inclusive design champion. I know that you have been working on it.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could just describe that to our listeners.
Well, what that is my job is to make inclusive design mainstream design. My job is to make anyone who designs anything have in their mind that anyone could be using it, anyone could be reading it. So, you know, bear in mind that a lot of people have impairments of one sort or another, and design for the extremes of the conditions in which human beings have to face life, and you will produce much better quality ideas. That's what it is.
Talking of producing better quality ideas, I think that if we look at the world and the changing, I mean, it's rapidly changing. We've seen what's happening in Libya right now, we've seen Egypt. It does raise this question of, we have absolutely no idea what the world will be like in 5 years, let alone 1 year, whatever the case may be. How does one act as a designer? It must be hugely challenging to act as a designer.
It is, and I think the beauty of it is at last we really have to start in the I don't know position. And, you know, I don't know is such a wonderful context for us to work in, you know, because if you don't know, all you've got is your creativity. All you've got is your imagination. And that's why I say my experience isn't my friend, because it tries to tell me that I do know. And I love not knowing.
So in the 100 or maybe 50 odd years that you've been working, if you had, yeah, we must add it all together. If you had to give advice, because I'm sure there are plenty of young designers here as well, if you had to say, looking back retrospectively, maybe what I wish I hadn't done, or I wish I had done, or I wish I'd known, what would those...
Oh, God, what a question.
I know, horrible.
Yeah, a completely disgraceful question. To be honest, I think I would say, I wish there was something in education which enabled you to detach from the habits of thinking who you think you might be, that you carry with you from your very early experiences. I wish there was a way of, like an engine can detach from the coaches. If the coaches you have tell you that you are less than you think you might be, or tell you to dread what you think you might be, if you could detach those coaches and just be the engine of potential, that would be fantastic. But I don't think education has reached the sophistication yet of dealing with us as individuals. It's dealing with us as classes still.
But that's what Ken Robinson says in the TED Talks.
Yeah,
he says that
absolutely.
as you go into your schooling education, you're born with creativity, but you use it as you go forward. Any tips on how to keep it?
Well, that lovely story that he told about the little girl, who could have been me, sitting in the classroom, not concentrating on what the teacher was saying, drawing, and the teacher goes over to the little girl and says, "What are you drawing?" And she says, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher says, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the little girl says, "They will in a minute." And that confidence, fantastic. Yeah.
Finally, Michael, you do, on your cell phone, you have a picture of the character,
Where I'm going.
where you're going.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I'm going to be a seagull, but I hope not too soon from now on. I'm quite looking forward to it.
And why?
Because they so obviously enjoy their capacity to fly. I mean, they look as if they're having the most wonderful time. They don't have terrible meetings. They don't have anything. I mean, they just glide blissfully over life, and I don't know how they keep so clean. And they're just beautiful creatures.
And they're not depressed like pigeons.
Pigeons are depressed.
Great way to end it. Michael Wolff, ladies and gentlemen.